The most consequential object in Nolan Wells's final hours may be a phone that nobody has publicly explained from beginning to end. A woman said she heard Nolan demanding that his phone be returned. She said an argument escalated into a physical fight involving Nolan and several people. Then she added the detail that turns a story into something investigators can test. She said video existed. That recording, if it exists in original form, could do something public argument cannot. It could put people in a place, possibly fix part of the sequence in time, and show whether at least one claimed confrontation happened. But it still would not answer the central question by itself. The woman said she left before the situation ended. She did not say she saw Nolan enter the water. She did not say she saw anyone kill him. Her account stops before the event that matters most. That stopping point is exactly why I keep coming back to the phone. The claim dispute gives the device one meaning before Nolan vanished from the group around him. The family's later statements give it another meaning, because supporters said the family had location capability and could track the device. Those two issues cannot simply be fused into one theory. We do not know from the public accounts who had the phone during the alleged argument, when it was returned, whether it remained with Nolan, or what its location history ultimately showed. No movement after Nolan's death is established here. No digital record publicly closes the gap. What exists is a very specific investigative opportunity. Compare the phone's custody and data against the claimed video, witness statements, and boat movements. A recording does not become decisive just because someone calls it video. Investigators would need the original file if possible, not only a social media copy. Creation time would matter. So would continuity, visible landmarks, voices, identifiable people, and any indication that the file had been altered. Even a short clip that showed only an argument could be important if it established who was present and when. The same applies to the message the woman said she sent afterward, warning one person that she and her husband had witnessed the dispute and had footage. If preserved, the timing of that message could help determine when she first put her account into writing. A statement made before weeks of public debate would carry a different investigative context from one shaped after the case had become a national argument. And there is a second witness built into her own claim. She said her husband was with her on another boat. If investigators interviewed both of them, their accounts could be compared detail by detail. Agreement on independently remembered specifics could strengthen the allegation. Differences could expose uncertainty. The public discussion does not establish whether that comparison occurred, whether police obtained the video, or whether its time information was preserved. That is not proof investigators ignored it. Public silence is not the same thing as investigative inaction, but it leaves a real verification gap. If you had to choose one record to test first, which would you put at the top? The original video file, Nolan's phone history, or a verified departure timeline? Put your answer in the comments, because any one of those could challenge the other two. The timeline matters because Nolan went to Horn Island with people he knew and did not return with them. His body was later found in the water. Beyond that broad sequence, the public accounts become less settled. One discussion used roughly 4:30 as a departure time for a Triton boat. In an earlier discussion, Brandon Tatum floated the possibility that an argument described in a message happened closer to 6. That later time was speculation, not a verified timestamp. The distinction is crucial. If a recording could be authenticated and dated, it might show whether the confrontation happened before or after certain people left. If the timing cannot be established, then two numbers that sound precise remain only public reference points. Chronology has a useful cruelty to it. It does not care who seems believable. If Nolan is fixed in one location at one time, every competing account has to fit around that point. A verified image, a phone location record, a boat log, a photograph with metadata, a call, or a message can become more valuable than hours of confident commentary, because fixed records can expose impossible sequences. The public material does not tell us which of those records investigators possessed. It tells us why the family kept pressing for a complete chain from Nolan's last reliable movements to his death. That chain begins with a crowded island, at least in the way the family's advocates described it. Attorney Benjamin Crump said there may have been roughly 300 to 400 people on Horn Island. That was an advocacy statement, not a verified attendance count. Still, it explains the family's frustration. Nolan was not described as disappearing from an empty shoreline with nobody nearby. His supporters believed there was a large pool of potential observers who might have seen an argument, a boat leaving, Nolan moving from one place to another, or a change in the group around him. A crowd can produce witnesses. It can also produce confusion. People depart, memories shift, and public discussion can contaminate recollection before investigators ever compare statements. The woman who described the confrontation placed a limit on her own story that matters. She said she would not speculate about what happened after she left. That is one of the most useful lines in the entire public debate, because it separates observation from conclusion. If her account is genuine, she may be able to establish an argument and perhaps a fight. She cannot complete the route from that confrontation to the water. The missing middle remains missing. That missing middle became harder to evaluate because public commentators did not always describe the allegation consistently. Tatum had earlier discussed a direct message in which a person claimed that she and her husband had seen someone arguing with Nolan. He said the message included language, warning that the person being addressed could spend the rest of his life in prison. At that stage, Tatum stressed that the message did not establish a physical fight and did not provide a firm time. Even so, he said it had changed his thinking enough that he was no longer convinced Nolan had simply drowned and believed somebody might know more. That was interpretation. It was not proof. Later, in a discussion hosted by Nancy Grace, Tatum said he had never heard of the altercation and that nobody he had spoken with had described anything like it. The two public statements appear to conflict, but the size of that conflict depends on something the public accounts do not settle: whether Tatum understood the earlier message and the later woman's allegation to describe the same event. The overlap is notable. A woman and her husband, an argument involving Nolan, a warning about prison. Yet the witness identity and the exact link between the two accounts were not independently established. It would be easy to call the inconsistency a lie. The evidence supplied here does not let me do that. There are several possible explanations, and none is established. Tatum may have meant that he had never heard a verified account of a physical fight. He may have understood the later allegation as a different event. He may have summarized the earlier message incompletely. He may have misspoken. The right test is not a personality judgment. It is the original message, the original recording if one exists, the names, dates, recipients, and any witness interviews. A contradiction becomes useful when it points toward records that can resolve it. Nancy Grace focused on that narrower point. A witness does not need to prove homicide to matter. If she can reliably place Nolan in a confrontation at a specific time, her account can support or break the timeline offered by other people who were present that day. Tatum pushed back from a different direction. He said the allegation did not explain how Nolan entered the water, and he characterized the autopsy as showing no clear blunt force trauma to Nolan's face or other vital areas that would indicate a fatal beating. That limit matters too. A fight is not automatically a killing. A confrontation can be real and still have no causal connection to a later death. This is where sequence can trick the mind. First an argument, then a death. The temptation is to draw a line between them because the line makes the story feel complete. But sequence is not causation. To connect those events, investigators would need something more. Injuries that fit, reliable witnesses, digital records, admissions, physical evidence, or some other supported bridge. The alleged confrontation creates a reason to search for that bridge. It does not supply the bridge. The toxicology discussion shows the same danger in a different form. Earlier, Tatum said unnamed people were telling him cocaine had been present on the island. He described one unnamed person as so confident that the person said there was a 150% chance cocaine would be found in Nolan's system. Later, Nancy Grace said reports indicated there was no cocaine, while immediately describing that information as uncorroborated. Those statements do not produce a settled toxicology result. One confident allegation followed by an uncorroborated contrary report is still uncertainty. That matters because technical fragments can sound more complete than they are. If an official toxicology result ultimately showed no cocaine, that would directly weaken the earlier prediction. It still would not explain how Nolan entered the water. If toxicology showed alcohol or another substance, that might matter to impairment, but it would not automatically establish accidental drowning. A substance result answers a substance question. It does not reconstruct every event around a death. The same narrow reading applies to the autopsy characterization. Tatum's statement about no clear lethal-looking blunt force trauma, if accurate, would create a problem for a theory that Nolan was beaten to death. It would not prove that no fight occurred. It would not establish whether Nolan was pushed, fell, entered the water voluntarily, entered while impaired, or reached the water through some other circumstance. None of those alternatives is established here. Forensic evidence is often strongest when it excludes a claim cleanly. Excluding one mechanism is not the same as proving another. Nolan's family wanted another medical examination. At the birthday gathering held after his death, Reverend Jamal Bryant said Crump had requested an independent autopsy and that Nolan's body was sent from Mississippi to Washington, D.C. That statement describes a concrete step the family's legal team said it had taken. It does not tell us what the second examination concluded. A second autopsy is a method. It is not a verdict. Agreement between examinations could strengthen confidence. A disagreement could identify a specific medical issue. Either result would be more useful than rumor. The family's distrust was not limited to forensic findings. A dispute developed over Nolan's phone itself. A commentator described the district attorney as saying Nolan's parents had not cooperated with a request to hand over the device. The parents' position, as relayed in that discussion, was that prosecutors imposed a deadline while they were out of town. The commentator went further and accused the district attorney of deliberately choosing a deadline the family could not meet. That claim about intent was not established. What was established in the public argument was a conflict over cooperation, timing, and a device both sides considered important. The emotional cost of that distrust became visible on the day Nolan should have been celebrating his 19th birthday. Christine said she woke with the impulse to FaceTime her son and sing the off-key birthday song she used with her children. Instead, she was speaking at a prayer rally about a son who was gone. She remembered his hugs. She remembered him telling her, "I love you, Ma." She recalled ordinary family routines involving his grandmother, coffee, and toast. None of those details solves a timeline. They do something equally necessary. They keep the case from reducing Nolan to a body in water and a stack of competing claims. Elmore described a different daily struggle. He said he prayed each morning for enough strength to face the uncertainty. He talked about the danger of pain becoming anger and the need to keep his balance while continuing to ask the same question: what happened to our son? That question is powerful because it does not assume a homicide. It does not assume an accident. It asks for the complete sequence. If you want evidence-first coverage that keeps that distinction intact, subscribe. Nolan's case does not need another confident theory dressed up as an answer. Nolan was 18 when he went to Horn Island, and he was described as a student athlete. His parents and Crump used his physical condition to explain why they resisted being told that drowning, by itself, should end the inquiry. Athletic ability does not make a person unable to drown. Fit people can drown. The family's point was narrower. If drowning was the mechanism, they wanted to know the circumstances that produced it. The public accounts do not establish water conditions, fatigue, intoxication, injury, panic, distance from shore, or any other specific factor that would explain an accidental drowning. Those gaps help explain why the label felt incomplete to them. The birthday gathering also changed the scale of the dispute. Clergy prayed, Bryant preached. Crump introduced members of the legal team. Leaders connected with civil rights organizations were recognized, and Spike Lee was acknowledged in attendance. The crowd sang happy birthday for Nolan while his parents stood with a cake for a son who was not there. The event was part memorial, part pressure campaign, and part demand for institutional accountability. Speakers placed Nolan's family within a long history of black families demanding answers when they believed authorities were not responding adequately. That historical framing explains the intensity of the rally, but it cannot decide Nolan's cause of death. Bryant and others invoked racism, unequal protection, and earlier civil rights cases. Those were advocacy arguments and expressions of fear rooted in history. They were not proof that Nolan was killed because of race. The accounts here do not establish a racial motive, an identified killer, or even that a homicide occurred. Respecting the family's demand for truth means refusing to declare a theory true before the evidence earns it. One rumor around the district attorney shows why that restraint matters. A commentator repeated a claim that the district attorney's husband had a connection to the FBI. Then he checked further and corrected it. His account said the husband had worked in local and state law enforcement, including as a chief investigator for a district attorney's office, and had attended the FBI National Academy in 2012. Attendance at that training program did not make him an FBI employee or special agent. The commentator said, The FBI employment claim led to a dead end. That correction is one of the cleanest investigative lessons in the case. Removing a false allegation does not weaken scrutiny, it improves it. The FBI was reportedly assisting local authorities in some capacity. That did not transform the district attorney's husband into a federal agent. Professional overlap did not prove coordination. A marriage did not prove obstruction. Once the premise failed, the conflict theory built on that premise lost its support. A case gets clearer when a satisfying rumor is killed cleanly. The same standard has to apply to everyone. A friend whose account changes should be confronted with the change. A witness whose account becomes more detailed should be asked why. A public official who calls a family uncooperative should be asked for the request, the deadline, and the response. A family representative who says a device was tracked should be asked for the location record and its time. Every serious claim should lead to the next document, the next recording, the next fixed data point, or the next interview. Suspicion without a test is just noise. That brings the alleged witness back into focus. She said a young woman tried to stop the confrontation. That person, if identifiable, could be another potential observer. Commentators speculated about relationships and motive, and the name Katie entered part of the discussion. Tatum said messages he had seen from a woman named Katie did not describe such a fight. Nancy Grace speculated about whether a young woman could have been connected to the dispute. None of that establishes jealousy, protectiveness, or any other motive. A phone dispute, plus a woman nearby, can be made to fit many stories. The evidence has not selected one, nor should the friends or acquaintances who left Horn Island be treated as guilty because Nolan did not leave with them. That fact is emotionally severe. It is not proof of criminal responsibility. Investigative meaning depends on context. The public material does not fully provide. Did they believe Nolan planned to stay? Did they think he had another ride? Was there confusion about transportation? Did an argument change plans? When did they realize he was missing? What did they tell authorities first? And did those accounts change? The unanswered questions justify scrutiny. They do not justify a verdict. This is where the case becomes less about choosing a theory and more about building a matrix. Put the alleged video on one side. Put phone data beside it. Add boat movements. Photographs with metadata if they exist. Calls, messages, first witness statements, later statements, autopsy findings, and toxicology. Then compare. A timestamp can challenge memory. A location record can challenge a timeline. A video can identify who was present. A medical finding can eliminate a proposed mechanism. The strength comes from independent records colliding with human recollection until some explanations survive and others do not. The family repeatedly asked for that kind of completeness. Crump complained that people connected to other young men seemed to know autopsy information before Nolan's family and lawyers did. A commentator repeated the concern. If true, that would raise questions about unequal access. But the public accounts do not establish who received which information, when they received it, or from whom. The immediate fact is more limited. Nolan's family believed other people were being informed while they were being kept at a distance. That belief fed the breakdown in trust. The public argument around Nolan's death repeatedly rewarded certainty before verification. The cocaine claim sounded certain because the language was extreme. The contrary report sounded decisive because it appeared to reverse that claim. The altercation sounded conclusive to some because a witness said she had video. The absence of lethal-looking trauma sounded conclusive to others because it weakened a beating theory. None of those fragments, by itself, explains the full sequence. The careful move is not to make every detail smaller. It is to make each detail exactly as large as the evidence allows. The witness claim, for example, could become enormously important without ever proving murder. If the original file exists and can be authenticated, it could establish a confrontation. If its time can be fixed, it could establish a clock. If the people can be identified, it could establish a group. If audio captures Nolan demanding his phone back, it could corroborate one part of the witness's account. And then the limits would still matter. The clip might end before anything connected to the water. It might show anger, but no physical violence. It might establish presence without causation. Evidence can be powerful because it narrows the field, not because it tells the entire story in one frame. The phone has the same double edge. A location history, matching Nolan continuously, would support one sequence. A temporary separation from the device would support another. If someone possessed it during the alleged dispute and returned it, that might explain the witness account without explaining Nolan's death at all. Those are hypotheticals, not events. Their value is that they show why the device's chain of custody and data matter so much. The phone could connect the alleged argument to the later search for Nolan, or it could show that the two issues were unrelated. And this is the place where I think the family's simplest question becomes an investigative standard rather than only an expression of grief. What happened to our son? Requires more than a mechanism. If drowning is correct, the sequence should explain how Nolan came to be in the water and why competing claims do not alter that conclusion. If criminal conduct occurred, the evidence must connect an act to a person without relying on rumor. If the evidence remains incomplete, the answer has to remain incomplete. Anything else is certainty added by narration, not by proof. One fact does stand firm through all of the noise. Nolan went to Horn Island with people he knew, and he did not return home with them. His body was later found in the water. His parents did not accept that the word drowning, standing alone, explained the path between those points. A woman claimed she saw an escalating dispute involving Nolan and his phone, followed by a physical confrontation, and she said video existed. Public figures disagreed about the significance and prior awareness of that allegation. Toxicology claims conflicted in public before an official result was established in these accounts. The family sought an independent autopsy and kept pressing for a verified timeline. That is the case in its strongest defensible form. There is no established killer here, no established murder weapon, no established racial motive, no established cocaine result, no verified public timestamp for the alleged fight, no established causal link between the confrontation and Nolan entering the water. Those absences do not prove an accident. They define what any homicide theory still has to prove. The reverse is also true. Saying accidental drowning does not automatically explain why Nolan was separated from the people he came with, what happened around the alleged confrontation, what the phone records showed, when the relevant boats left, or who last saw him under circumstances that can be independently verified. A mechanism can be accurate and still leave the root to that mechanism unresolved. That is why the middle of this story matters more than the label at the end. There is a practical order for closing that middle. Authenticate the alleged video, preserve and examine its metadata, compare the witness and her husband separately, identify the young woman the witness said intervened, put those accounts against the earliest messages they sent. Then compare all of it with phone records and any fixed evidence of boat departures or movements. Finally, test the resulting sequence against the medical findings. Each layer either supports the next or breaks it. If the video does not exist, that is a result. If it exists but cannot be authenticated, that is a result. If the timestamp places the confrontation earlier than people assumed, that is a result. If phone data shows nothing inconsistent with the known timeline, that matters. If witness memories conflict with fixed records, the records become the pressure point. An investigation does not become weaker when a dramatic possibility collapses. It becomes more precise. That precision is what Nolan's parents have been asking for beneath the rallies, lawyers, commentators, and public arguments. Christine's birthday memory and Elmore's daily question do not tell investigators which theory to choose. They explain why an incomplete sequence is not a satisfying answer. A family can survive uncertainty only by living with it. An investigation is supposed to reduce it. If cases like Nolan's should be judged by records that can withstand comparison, rather than by whoever speaks with the most confidence, keep that standard in front of you and share this with someone who will do the same. The most useful next fact may not be dramatic at all. It may be a creation time on a file, a location point on a device, a departure record, or an early message preserved before the public debate hardened around competing sides. One verified point could force several stories to change at once. And among all those possibilities, one object keeps crossing the boundary between the alleged confrontation and the later search for answers: Nolan's phone. Somewhere between possession, location, and timing, that device stopped being ordinary property and became a clock.